Tom Wilson stared at the envelope on his kitchen counter for the third time that morning. The return address belonged to a law firm he'd never heard of, based in a small Vermont town he couldn't even place on a map. He'd opened it last night, after work, and the contents had kept him awake until 3 in the morning. "Your Uncle Harold Wilson has passed away," the letter had stated in stiff formal language. "As his only living relative, you have inherited his property, including a cabin located in Green Mountain, Vermont." Tom sipped his coffee, still struggling to process the news. Uncle Harold was someone he barely remembered, a distant relative who had visited only a handful of times during Tom's childhood. A quiet man with a bushy beard who would bring oddly thoughtful gifts. A hand-carved chess set when Tom was 10, a compass with a secret compartment when he was 12. Then the visits had stopped, and Harold had become just a name mentioned occasionally at family gatherings. And now Tom had inherited his cabin. His phone buzzed with a text from his friend. "Dave, still on for lunch?" Tom had nearly forgotten. He texted back a quick confirmation and attached one of the photos that had come with the letter. A small, weathered cabin that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. "Guess who's a property owner now?" added. 3 dots appeared immediately, followed by Dave's response. "Dude, is that a shed or a house?" An hour later, Tom sat in the corner booth of Carson's, the sandwich place near his accounting firm's office. Dave was already there with Priya and Josh from work. "Here he is," Dave announced as Tom approached. "The real estate mogul himself." Tom slid into the booth, already regretting having shared the photo. Yeah, laugh it up." "I'm serious," Dave continued, turning his phone to show Priya and Josh the picture. Tom's rich uncle left him a luxury property, prime real estate. Josh squinted at the image. "Wow, that's rustic." "That's one word for it," Priya said, trying and failing to hide her smile. "Does it have indoor plumbing, or is there an outhouse we can't see in the picture?" Tom sighed and picked up a menu, though he always ordered the same thing. "I don't know much about it. I barely knew my uncle." "So what are you going to do with it?" Josh asked, mercifully changing the subject from the cabin's questionable appearance. "Probably sell it," Tom replied. "I mean, what am I going to do with a cabin in the middle of nowhere? It's got to be at least 5 hours from here." "You could fix it up," Priya suggested. "People pay good money for those rustic getaway experiences." Dave snorted. "Fix it up? Look at it. That's not a fixer-upper, that's a teardown. The land might be worth something, though." The waitress arrived to take their orders, and Tom was grateful for the interruption. As they waited for their food, the conversation shifted to office gossip and weekend plans. But Tom found his thoughts drifting back to the cabin. There had been more information in the packet. Property taxes, surprisingly low, a crude map showing the location, definitely remote, and a letter from Uncle Harold himself. That letter had been the strangest part. Written in a shaky hand, it simply said, "Tom, things aren't always what they seem. I hope you'll visit at least once before deciding what to do. The key is enclosed. Harold." The small iron key had felt unusually heavy in Tom's palm. "Earth, to Tom," Dave was waving a hand in front of his face. "You're zoning out on us." "Sorry." Tom shook his head. "Just thinking about this whole inheritance thing." "You know what you should do," Josh said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "You should have a cabin party. One last hurrah before you sell it." Priya rolled her eyes. "Did you miss the part where it looks like it's one stiff breeze away from becoming a pile of sticks?" "That's what makes it fun," Josh insisted. "We'll bring sleeping bags, drinks, make a whole weekend of it." "I don't even know if the place has electricity," Tom protested. "Even better. It'll be like camping, but with walls." Dave was already warming to the idea. "We could go next weekend. I don't have plans." Tom looked at his friends' expectant faces and felt a mix of amusement and resignation. "I should probably check it out first. Make sure it's not, filled with raccoons or actually condemned." "Fine," Dave conceded. "You go scout it this weekend, and if it passes the probably won't kill us test, we'll all go the weekend after." Their food arrived, and Tom took a bite of his sandwich, wondering how he'd gotten roped into this. He'd been planning to call a local real estate agent to handle everything without him ever having to make the trip. But now he felt a strange pull toward the place, a mixture of curiosity about Uncle Harold's life and a nagging feeling that he should at least see the cabin once. Back at his apartment that evening, Tom found himself looking up Green Mountain, Vermont. It was even more remote than he'd thought, a small community nestled in the forest with a population that couldn't be more than a few hundred people. The nearest real town was about 30 minutes away. He pulled out his uncle's letter, again, and studied the handwriting. Things aren't always what they seem. What had Harold meant by that? Was he just being philosophical, or was there something specific about the cabin? Tom had a comfortable life, a decent apartment, a stable job, friends he liked. But lately, he'd been feeling restless, like he was just going through the motions. Maybe a weekend away was exactly what he needed, even if it was in a questionable cabin. He opened his laptop and requested Friday off from work, then found himself searching for information about cabin maintenance and what to look for when assessing property damage. He added flashlights, batteries, and a first aid kit to his mental packing list. By Thursday night, Tom's practical side was having second thoughts. He'd packed his car with enough supplies for a small expedition, sleeping bag, cooler full of food, portable phone charger, tools he wasn't even sure how to use properly. His friends had been texting him all week with increasingly ridiculous suggestions for what he might find in the cabin, ranging from moonshine stills to buried treasure. Maybe there's a reason Uncle Harold lived like a hermit in the woods, Dave had texted. Secret government experiment gone wrong? Bigfoot research station? Or maybe he just liked privacy, Tom had replied. As he set his alarm for an early departure, Tom felt a strange mix of emotions. Anxiety about what condition the cabin might be in, curiosity about his uncle's life, and an unexpected excitement about the break from his routine. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for a drive into the mountains. Tom started the 5-hour journey with a travel mug of coffee and a playlist of podcasts. As he left the city behind, the landscape gradually changed, suburbs giving way to farmland, then rolling hills that grew steeper and more densely forested. His phone's navigation worked until the last hour, when the signal became spotty. Tom switched to the printed directions from the lawyer's packet, turning onto increasingly narrow roads. The final stretch was a dirt path that made his car bounce and rattle alarmingly, and then around a bend he saw it. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines and maples just beginning to show hints of fall color. It looked exactly like the photo, small, with weathered gray wood siding, a slightly sagging porch, and windows that seemed too small for proper light. Tom parked and sat in his car for a moment, taking it all in. The setting was beautiful, he had to admit, peaceful in a way his apartment in the city never could be. Birds were singing, and a light breeze rustled the leaves overhead. But the cabin itself? Dave's description of a glorified shed wasn't far off. Tom grabbed his backpack and approached slowly, half expecting the porch steps to give way beneath his weight. They creaked loudly but held firm. At the door he hesitated, remembering his uncle's strange note. Things aren't always what they seem. Tom pulled out the iron key, surprised again by its weight and the intricate design on its head. Not what you'd expect for such a humble structure. He inserted the key into the lock, which turned with unexpected smoothness. Tom took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Not sure what he was hoping to find, but certain that whatever it was would lead to some merciless teasing from his friends when he reported back. The hinges made no sound as the door swung inward. Tom stepped inside, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light, ready to face whatever awaited him in Uncle Harold's cabin. Tom stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes slowly adjusting to the cabin's interior. His first impression was one of darkness and dust, exactly what he'd expected. But as more details emerged from the shadows, his confusion grew. "What the?" he whispered to himself. The cabin's inside was nothing like its exterior suggested. Instead of a cramped, decrepit space, he found himself looking at a single large room with a ceiling that extended surprisingly high overhead. Wooden beams crossed above him, solid and well-maintained. The floor beneath his feet wasn't the rotting planks he'd anticipated, but smooth, polished hardwood. Tom took a few cautious steps forward, half expecting the floor to give way. It didn't. Instead, his footsteps echoed slightly in the unexpectedly spacious room. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, large enough that Tom could have stood inside it. Unlike the weathered exterior, the stonework looked meticulous, with not a single mortar line out of place. "Uncle Harold, what were you up to out here?" Tom muttered, setting his backpack down by the door. The cabin smelled of wood and something else. Not the mustiness he'd expected, but a faint scent of beeswax and cedar. Natural light filtered in through windows that from the outside had seemed tiny and grimy. From the inside, Tom realized, they were positioned to capture sunlight throughout the day, their glass clean and clear. Tom pulled out his phone to take pictures. His friends would never believe this, but found no signal. He'd have to wait to show them. Instead, he continued his exploration, running his hands over the smooth wooden walls. Unlike the weathered, gray exterior, the inside walls glowed with a warm, honey-colored finish. In one corner stood a kitchen area with a wooden countertop and what looked like cabinets built seamlessly into the wall. Tom approached and tugged at what seemed to be a handle. The wooden panel swung open silently, revealing a small but modern refrigerator. "No way," Tom said aloud. He opened more cabinets, finding a surprising array of modern appliances hidden behind the rustic wooden facade. A microwave, a coffee maker, even what appeared to be a dishwasher, all apparently newer models. But there were no power cords visible anywhere. Tom looked up at the ceiling, noticing for the first time small, discrete lights built into the wooden beams. He searched the walls until he found what looked like a light switch, a small wooden knob that blended almost perfectly with the wall. He turned it hesitantly. Soft light filled the cabin, illuminating details he'd missed. Built-in bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes whose spines showed subjects ranging from architecture to philosophy to wilderness survival. A comfortable-looking couch and 2 armchairs were arranged near the fireplace, with a coffee table made from what appeared to be a single slab of polished tree trunk. "This doesn't make any sense," Tom said to himself. He walked to a door in the back wall that he assumed led to a bedroom. Opening it revealed a bathroom instead, small but immaculate, with a stone-tiled shower, a sink made from what looked like a hollowed boulder, and modern fixtures that somehow didn't clash with the rustic elements. A wooden ladder in one corner of the main room led to a loft area. Tom climbed it carefully, finding a cozy sleeping space with a low ceiling. A bed with a handmade quilt occupied most of the space, along with a small bedside table holding a lamp and several books. A skylight above the bed would offer a view of the stars at night. Tom sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The contrast between the cabin's ramshackle exterior and its sophisticated interior was so extreme it seemed deliberate. He remembered his uncle's note. "Things aren't always what they seem." "You can say that again, Uncle Harold," Tom muttered. He climbed back down to the main floor and noticed a small desk in another corner, partly hidden by the angle of the kitchen area. On it sat an old typewriter, several notebooks, and a framed photograph. Tom picked up the photo, wiping away a thin layer of dust. It showed a younger version of Uncle Harold, standing proudly in front of what appeared to be this very cabin, though the exterior looked newer in the image. Beside him stood a woman Tom didn't recognize, both of them smiling widely. Tom set the photo down gently, feeling like he was intruding on something private. His attention turned to the notebooks. The top one had Cabin Journal, Volume 12, written on its cover in his uncle's distinctive handwriting. Tom hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won out. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. "Finished installing the solar system today," Harold had written. "Finally got the battery storage working properly. The whole setup is hidden behind the east wall panel, as planned. From the outside, no one would ever guess this place has electricity, much less a full modern system. Just the way I like it." Tom looked up from the journal, scanning the walls until he spotted a section that seemed slightly different from the rest. He walked over and pressed around the edges until he felt a click. A panel swung open to reveal a sophisticated electrical system with labeled switches and what appeared to be a monitoring screen showing battery levels and power usage. Solar-powered, Tom whispered in amazement. Off-grid but fully modern. He returned to the journal, flipping through more entries. Reinforced the foundation and roof last month, but carefully maintained the weathered look outside. William from town thinks I'm crazy for not fixing up the place. If he only knew. The secret is safe as long as the outside looks like it's barely standing. No nosy neighbors, no burglars, no tax assessors getting too curious. Just me and my perfect hideaway. Tom closed the journal, beginning to understand. His uncle had deliberately created this contradiction, a state-of-the-art home disguised as a dilapidated cabin. The perfect place to live undisturbed. But why? What had driven Harold to create this hidden marvel and then keep it secret from everyone? Tom turned back to the desk and noticed a drawer he'd overlooked. Inside was a thick envelope with his name written on it. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it and pulled out several pages of his uncle's handwriting. Tom, the letter began, if you're reading this, then you've looked past appearances and discovered what I've spent the last 20 years creating. I imagine you're confused, maybe even thinking your eccentric uncle finally went off the deep end. But there was a method to my madness. Tom settled into one of the armchairs by the fireplace to read the rest of the letter. Outside, the afternoon, light began to fade, casting long shadows through the windows. He hadn't planned to stay overnight. The sleeping bag in his car was just a precaution, but now he couldn't imagine leaving before he'd uncovered all the cabin's secrets. He continued reading as his uncle's words revealed a life philosophy, built around rejecting appearances and finding value in what lies beneath the surface. Harold described how he'd made his fortune as an architectural designer, specializing in hidden spaces and sustainability, then retreated from public life after a personal tragedy, the death of his wife, Lisa, the woman in the photograph. The cabin became my sanctuary and my canvas, Harold wrote. Every detail designed by my hand, every feature serving both function and my need for solitude. The world only saw what I wanted it to see, an old man in a rundown cabin. Meanwhile, I lived exactly as I pleased. The letter continued for several pages, detailing hidden features of the cabin that Tom hadn't yet discovered. A root cellar accessed through the fireplace, a workshop built underneath the porch, a natural spring that supplied the cabin's water. As darkness fell outside, Tom found another wooden knob on the wall and turned it. The fireplace came to life, gas flames dancing over ceramic logs that looked remarkably real. The gentle heat began to fill the room as Tom reached the final paragraphs of his uncle's letter. I have no right to tell you what to do with this place, Tom. Sell it if you must. But before you decide, spend some time here. The cabin has a way of revealing things, not just its own secrets, but perhaps some of yours as well. It showed me who I really was, underneath the person I thought I needed to be for others. Whatever you choose, remember, the most valuable things in life often don't announce themselves. They wait quietly to be discovered by those who care enough to look deeper. Your uncle, Harold. Tom folded the letter carefully and looked around the cabin with new eyes. Outside it had started to rain, drops pattering softly on the roof. He'd need to call his friends, tell them about this incredible place. But not yet. First, he wanted to experience it for himself, to understand what his uncle had created here, and perhaps why he'd chosen Tom to inherit it. He took out his phone and composed a text message to Dave, knowing it wouldn't send until he drove back to where he had signal. Made it to the cabin. You guys won't believe what I found. It's not what we thought. Not at all. Tom smiled to himself as he got up to explore more of his unexpected inheritance. The joke, it seemed, was on everyone who had laughed. Tom spent the entire weekend at the cabin, discovering new secrets with each passing hour. He found the workshop hidden beneath the porch, accessed through what looked like a wood storage compartment. Inside were tools arranged with perfect precision, hand planes, chisels, saws, and machines he couldn't name. Projects in various stages of completion lined the walls, revealing his uncle's craftsmanship. The root cellar behind the fireplace contained preserved foods, wines, and a collection of heirloom seeds. The natural spring his uncle mentioned bubbled up into a small stone basin before being piped throughout the cabin's plumbing system. Every discovery left Tom more amazed than the last. By Sunday afternoon, he was torn about leaving, but his job waited for him back in the city, and he'd already decided he would return the following weekend with his friends. Their reactions would be priceless. The drive back gave Tom time to think. He kept seeing the contrast between the cabin's deceptive exterior and its remarkable interior. How many times had he judged situations or even people the same way, based on surface appearances? The thought made him uncomfortable. Back at his apartment, the space felt different somehow, cramped and artificial compared to the cabin's organic warmth. Tom charged his phone and found a barrage of messages from Dave, Priya, and Josh. "Still alive?" Dave had texted. "Or did the cabin collapse on you? What's the verdict, tear down or fixer-upper?" From Josh. "Hope you didn't fall through the floor," Priya had written. Tom smiled and sent a group message. "Cabin exceeded expectations. You need to see it. This weekend?" The responses came quickly, skeptical but curious. They agreed to carpool on Friday, after work. Throughout the week, Tom found himself distracted at the office, his mind wandering back to the cabin. He researched solar power systems similar to his uncle's and ordered books on woodworking. During lunch breaks, he sketched ideas for projects he might try in the workshop. "You're acting weird," Dave commented on Thursday as they ate at their usual spot. "This cabin's really got under your skin, huh?" Tom shrugged. "Wait till you see it." "I still think you're overselling it," Josh said. "It's a shack in the woods." "We'll see," Tom replied with a smile. Friday afternoon finally arrived. Tom had packed the car with groceries and drinks for the weekend. His friends piled in with their bags, the back seat a jumble of sleeping bags and duffel bags. "I still can't believe we're spending our weekend in Unabomber territory," Dave joked as they left the city behind. "Should we be worried about bears?" Priya asked from the back seat. "I brought bear spray just in case." "The only wildlife I saw last weekend was squirrels and birds," Tom assured her. "Though I did hear something howling one night." "Great," Josh muttered. "Wolves, too." As they drove deeper into the countryside, Tom felt a growing anticipation. He had told them nothing about the cabin's true nature, wanting to preserve the surprise. "So what's the plan?" Dave asked. "Are we actually sleeping in this place or camping outside?" "The cabin is perfectly habitable," Tom said. "That's not what the picture suggested," Priya reminded him. "I packed an extra blanket in case there are holes in the roof." Tom just smiled and kept driving. The sun was setting as they turned onto the final dirt road. Tom's friends peered through the windows at the darkening forest with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "How far are we from civilization?" Josh asked. "About 30 minutes to the nearest town," Tom replied. "But the cabin has everything we need, except indoor plumbing, electricity, and heating," Dave muttered. When they finally rounded the bend and the cabin came into view, Tom heard exactly the reactions he'd expected. "That's it?" Priya said. "It looks even worse than in the picture." "Are those mushrooms growing on the porch?" Josh pointed. "Tom, buddy." Dave clapped a hand on his shoulder. "I know it was free, but some free things aren't worth keeping." Tom parked and turned to his friends with a grin. "Just wait." They approached the cabin warily, stepping carefully on the creaking porch steps. Tom's friends exchanged glances as he pulled out the heavy iron key. "At least the lock looks solid," Dave commented. "Though I'm not sure what you're trying to keep out or in." Tom pushed the door open and stepped aside. "After you." His friends hesitated, then Josh went first, followed by Dave and Priya. Tom counted silently. 1, 2, 3. "What the—" Josh stopped dead in his tracks. "No way." Dave pushed past him, then froze as well. Priya's gasp was audible as she stepped into the cabin. "Tom, what is this?" Tom followed them in, closing the door behind him. He reached for the wooden knob on the wall, and the cabin filled with warm light, illuminating his friends' astonished faces. "Welcome to Uncle Harold's cabin," he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. For several minutes, his friends wandered the main room in stunned silence, touching the polished wood, examining the hidden appliances, staring up at the beamed ceiling. "This is insane," Dave finally said. "It's like one of those tiny houses on TV, but next level." "How is this possible?" Priya asked, opening and closing the wooden panels that concealed the modern kitchen. "It looks like a shack outside." Josh had found the electrical panel. "Is this solar-powered? The whole system looks professional grade." Tom showed them the bathroom, the loft sleeping area, and finally the hidden workshop. With each revelation, their disbelief grew. "Your uncle built all this himself?" Priya asked, examining a half-finished chess set in the workshop. "As far as I can tell," Tom replied. "He was some kind of architectural designer. I found some of his professional portfolios in a trunk. He specialized in hidden spaces and sustainable design." Back in the main room, Dave flopped onto the couch. "Well, I take back every joke I made. This place is incredible." As evening fell, they prepared dinner in the kitchen, marveling at how everything functioned perfectly despite the cabin's remote location. Tom built a fire, and they sat around it with drinks, the atmosphere now completely different from the skepticism of the journey there. "So what are you going to do with it?" Josh asked. "You're not still planning to sell, are you?" Tom looked around the cabin. "No, definitely not selling. I'm still figuring out what this place means to me, but I know I want to keep it." "I don't blame you," Priya said. "This is special. Your uncle was either a genius or slightly mad. Maybe both." "I found more of his journals today," Tom said. "In the desk drawer. I've only read bits and pieces, but it seems like he was working on something big before he died. Some kind of book about architecture and philosophy. About how the spaces we create shape our lives." "Deep stuff," Dave commented. "Who'd have thought there was a philosopher hiding out here in the woods?" Later, after his friends had claimed various sleeping spots, Josh in the loft, Dave on the couch, Priya on an air mattress near the fire, Tom sat alone at his uncle's desk, reading more journal entries by the light of a small lamp. "The cabin teaches me something new each day," his uncle had written. "The value of deception, not as dishonesty, but as protection for what matters most. The world is too quick to judge, too eager to commodify anything of beauty or value. Some things deserve to remain hidden until the right person comes along to appreciate them." Tom closed the journal, feeling a connection to his uncle that transcended their limited interactions in life. In this space, surrounded by Harold's creations, Tom felt he was finally getting to know the man. He pulled out the photo of Harold and his wife that he'd found earlier. Something about their expressions, pride mixed with a secret joy, made sense now. They had created their own world here, hidden in plain sight. In the quiet of the night, with his friend's soft breathing the only sound, Tom made a decision. He would continue what his uncle had started. Not just maintain the cabin, but learn from it. Perhaps even add to it in ways that honored Harold's vision. As he finally drifted off to sleep in one of the armchairs, Tom smiled to himself. Monday would come too soon, pulling him back to the city and his normal life. But now he had this place and this beautiful secret, waiting for him whenever he needed it. And for the first time in years, Tom felt something that had been missing from his carefully planned life: possibility. Over the next few months, the cabin became Tom's second home. Every Friday after work, he'd pack his car and make the drive into the mountains, returning to the city late Sunday evening with reluctance. His apartment began to feel less like home and more like a temporary space he occupied between cabin visits. October brought brilliant fall colors to the forest surrounding the cabin. Tom spent hours on the porch, which he'd carefully reinforced while maintaining its weathered appearance, watching leaves drift down in red and gold spirals. He'd started a journal of his own, modeling it after his uncle's detailed records. "Fixed the loose step on the porch today," he wrote one evening. "Made sure it still creaks convincingly. I'm beginning to understand why Uncle Harold kept up the facade. There's something peaceful about being overlooked." At work, his colleagues noticed the change in him. The dark circles under his eyes had faded, and he brought a quiet confidence to meetings that hadn't been there before. "Whatever you're doing on those weekends, keep it up," his boss commented, after Tom successfully presented a proposal he would have been nervous about just months earlier. Dave, Priya, and Josh visited the cabin occasionally, but they were city people at heart. They enjoyed the novelty but couldn't understand Tom's growing attachment to the place. "Don't you get bored out here?" Dave asked during their second visit. "There's no internet, no bars, no people." Tom had just smiled. "That's kind of the point." As November arrived with its chill winds, Tom discovered another of the cabin's secrets. He had been organizing the workshop when he noticed that one section of the wall didn't match the others. Following his uncle's example, he pressed and prodded until he found the release mechanism. The panel slid aside to reveal a small, hidden room lined with bookshelves. But unlike the main cabin's collection, these books were handmade, journals bound in leather, each carefully labeled with dates stretching back decades. Tom pulled one from the shelf, dated 30 years earlier. Inside, he found not just writing, but detailed sketches, architectural drawings, nature studies, and portraits. His uncle had been documenting his life and thoughts in these volumes for longer than Tom had been alive. That night, Tom stayed, up reading, piecing together his uncle's story. Harold had been a rising star in architectural design in his youth, working for prestigious firms in Boston and New York. But the corporate world had stifled him, pushing him to create flashy, impressive structures that prioritized appearance over substance. "Another glass tower completed today," Harold had written in a journal from his early career. "The clients are thrilled with how it dominates the skyline. Meanwhile, the interior spaces make people feel like insects in a jar. No one seems to notice or care." The journals documented Harold's growing disillusionment, his meeting and falling in love with Lisa, and their shared dream of a different kind of life. They had purchased the land with the rundown cabin as a weekend retreat, gradually transforming it while maintaining its humble exterior. "We finished the hidden kitchen storage today," read an entry from 25 years ago. Lisa laughed when I insisted on making sure the panels were undetectable. "Who are we hiding from?" she asked. I told her it wasn't about hiding. It was about the joy of creating something perfect that doesn't need to announce itself to the world. Tom read about their happiness in this secret paradise, and then the devastating illness that took Lisa, too young. Harold's grief was palpable in the sparse entries that followed. For nearly a year, the journal contained only brief notes about the weather or maintenance tasks. Then gradually, Harold had returned to his projects, pouring his energy into perfecting the cabin. He'd started consulting work, designing hidden spaces and sustainable features for select clients who shared his philosophy. The cabin became both his laboratory and his sanctuary. In the most recent volumes, Tom found mentions of himself, brief notes about his birthday, clippings from the alumni newsletter of Tom's college, even a few photos Harold had somehow obtained of Tom at various ages. "Saw Tom in the city today," read an entry from just 5 years ago. "He didn't notice me, why would he? We've met so rarely. He looks tired, like everyone else in that rushing crowd. I wonder if this place could do for him what it did for me." Tom closed the journal, feeling a complex mix of emotions. His uncle had been watching over him from a distance all these years, seeing something in Tom that Tom himself hadn't recognized. A need for something different from his carefully plotted urban life. The discovery of the journals deepened Tom's connection to the cabin and its creator. He began spending more time in the workshop, teaching himself woodworking using his uncle's tools and notes. His first projects were clumsy, uneven cutting boards and wobbly shelves, but he improved quickly, guided by Harold's detailed instructions. By December, Tom had created his first significant addition to the cabin, a writing desk for the main room, designed to complement his uncle's work. He positioned it near a window that caught the morning light, a place where he could write in his own journal while watching the snow fall. As the holidays approached, Tom made a decision that surprised his friends. Instead of joining their annual ski trip, he would spend Christmas at the cabin. "Alone? Really?" Priya had asked when he told them. "That sounds depressing." "It won't be," Tom had replied. unable to explain how the cabin never made him feel lonely, only pleasantly solitary. He arrived at the cabin on Christmas Eve, the forest around it transformed by a recent snowfall. The pines bowed under white. Blankets and icicles hung from the cabin's deliberately weathered eaves like crystal decorations. Inside, Tom built a fire and prepared a simple meal, listening to the winter wind outside. He'd brought a small tree cut from his own land and decorated it with wooden ornaments he'd carved himself over the past weeks. As darkness fell, he sat at his uncle's desk and opened a fresh page in his journal. "First Christmas at the cabin," he wrote. "The city feels like another world now. Noisy, artificial, everyone rushing but never arriving. Here, time moves differently. I'm starting to understand what Uncle Harold found in this place. It's not just a building, it's a way of seeing the world." Tom paused, pen hovering over the paper. Since discovering the cabin, subtle changes had been happening in his daily life. He'd simplified his apartment, giving away furniture and decorations that suddenly seemed pointless. He'd started declining invitations to networking events that once seemed crucial to his career advancement. At work, he focused on projects with real meaning rather than those that would impress the right people. His friends had noticed. "You've gone all minimalist on us," Dave had commented during their last lunch together. "Next thing you know, you'll quit your job and become a full-time mountain man." The idea wasn't as absurd as it would have seemed months ago. Tom had been exploring options, remote work, consulting, even taking a leave of absence. The cabin had shown him a different way to measure success, one based on substance rather than appearance. As the fire crackled and snow fell softly outside, Tom continued writing in his journal, planning the next phase of his life, one that would honor both his uncle's legacy and his own emerging vision of what truly mattered. Spring came to the mountains, bringing new life to the forest around the cabin. Wildflowers pushed through the melting snow, and birds returned to build nests in the surrounding trees. Tom stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A year had passed since he'd received the letter about his inheritance. In that time, everything had changed. 3 months ago, Tom had handed in his resignation at the accounting firm. His boss had been surprised but not entirely shocked. "I've seen this coming," she'd said. "You've had one foot out the door since last fall. What's next for you?" Tom had smiled. "I'm going to try something different." That something different was taking shape in the form of a small consulting business, operating primarily from the cabin. Tom had converted part of the workshop into an office space, installing a satellite internet connection that Harold would have appreciated. Powerful, but hidden, with the dish camouflaged among the trees. His first clients were friends of friends, people looking for financial advice from someone who understood the value of substance over flash. Tom helped small business owners and individuals focus on what truly mattered in their financial lives, stripping away complications and finding sustainable solutions. Between clients, he continued to explore woodworking, creating furniture that combined his uncle's aesthetic with his own emerging style. The dining table he'd recently completed featured hidden compartments and an intricate inlay pattern that revealed itself only in certain light, a nod to Harold's philosophy that beauty didn't need to announce itself loudly. The cabin itself had evolved under his care. Tom had maintained its deceptive exterior while adding his own touches to the interior. A reading nook beneath the window, shelves that followed the natural curves of the wood, a door to the workshop that disappeared into the wall pattern when closed. Today was special. His friends were visiting for the first time since his move to the cabin full-time. Tom had spent the morning preparing, making sure everything was perfect. He'd baked bread in the small oven, prepared a stew from his own garden vegetables, and set up the outdoor area for an evening fire. The sound of tires on gravel announced their arrival. Tom watched as Dave's car pulled up, followed by Josh's. Priya had carpooled with Dave. They emerged, stretching after the long drive, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. This visit was different from their previous ones. Before, they'd come for weekends of escape, treating the cabin like a novelty. Now they were coming to see the life Tom had chosen, a life they still didn't fully understand. "Welcome," Tom called from the porch. "How was the drive?" "Long," Dave replied, grabbing his bag from the trunk. "I still can't believe you do this regularly." "I don't," Tom said with a smile. "I live here now. No driving necessary." His friends exchanged glances as they approached, and Tom knew what they were thinking. They were worried about him, concerned he'd made a terrible mistake giving up his career, his apartment, his place in their shared urban world. "The place looks exactly the same," Josh commented, eyeing the weathered exterior. "Still going for the about-to-collapse aesthetic, huh?" "That's the point," Tom replied. "Come inside. I've made some changes you might like." The cabin welcomed them with its warm wooden glow. Tom had added more hidden lighting, giving the space a softer ambiance. The new furniture pieces blended seamlessly with his uncle's original designs, creating an environment that felt both familiar and fresh. "Wow," Priya said, running her hand along the edge of Tom's new dining table. "Did you make this?" Tom nodded. "Finished it last month. The wood came from a fallen oak on the property." His friends explored the space, noticing the changes. The expanded kitchen area, the new reading nook, the office space visible through the workshop door. "This is actually really nice," Dave admitted, settling into one of the armchairs by the fire. "But don't you get lonely out here, cut off from everything?" Tom shook his head. "I'm not cut off. I'm connected to what matters." He gestured to his office. "I have clients. I have my projects. I have this place." They spent the afternoon catching up. Tom served lunch on the porch, where he'd built a table and benches that offered views of the surrounding forest. His friends shared news from the city, office politics, dating disasters, apartment hunting woes, while Tom listened, feeling both connected to and removed from that world. "So how's business?" Josh asked as they cleared the lunch dishes. "Can you really make a living out here in the middle of nowhere?" "Better than I did in the city," Tom replied. "Low overhead helps, and people seem to appreciate the perspective I can offer now, seeing past the surface to what really matters." As evening approached, they gathered around the outdoor fire pit Tom had created, wrapped in blankets against the mountain chill. "I still don't get it," Dave said, warming his hands by the flames. "You had everything figured out. Good job, nice apartment, clear career path. Then you inherit this old cabin and suddenly throw it all away to become, what? A mountain hermit with a woodworking hobby?" Tom smiled, not offended by his friend's bluntness. "I didn't throw anything away. I just found something better." "But what about your plans?" Priya asked. "You always said you wanted to be a partner in the firm by 40. "Plans change when you discover what you really want," Tom replied. He looked around at the cabin, the workshop visible through the window, the garden he'd started. "This place showed me that I was building a life based on what looked impressive, rather than what felt right." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Tom's friends exchanged glances, absorbing his words. "Are you happy?" Josh finally asked. "That's what matters, I guess." "Happier than I've ever been," Tom said without hesitation. Later, after his friends had gone to bed, Dave and Josh in the guest room Tom had built in an extension off the main cabin, Priya in the loft. Tom sat at his desk, writing in his journal. "Had an important realization today," he wrote. "A year ago, everyone laughed when I inherited this cabin. They saw a worthless shack. I saw the same at first. Now they visit and see a nice house in the woods, but they're still missing what's truly valuable here. It's not just the hidden features or clever design. It's the lesson this place teaches, that worth isn't determined by outside appearances or others' perceptions." Tom paused, pen hovering over the page. He thought about his uncle's journey and his own parallel path. Harold had retreated to the cabin after loss, finding healing in its honest spaces. Tom had come without tragedy driving him, but had found something he hadn't known he was missing: authenticity, purpose, connection to something real. In the morning, Tom took his friends hiking on a trail that wound up the mountain behind the cabin. At the summit, they stood together looking out over miles of forest, the cabin a tiny speck below. "I get it now," Priya said quietly. "Why you love it here." "Me too," Dave admitted. "Still think you're a little crazy, but in a good way." They descended in comfortable silence. The tension of the previous day melted away. By the time they reached the cabin, something had shifted. His friend saw Tom differently now, not as someone who had made a strange choice, but as someone who had found his path. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Josh pulled Tom aside. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said about building a life that feels right instead of looks right," he said. "It stuck with me. I'm not ready to move to the woods, but maybe I need to rethink some things." Tom smiled. The cabin does that to people. After waving goodbye to his friends, Tom stood on the porch watching their cars disappear down the dirt road. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the clearing. From the outside, the cabin still looked like a rundown shack that might collapse in a strong wind. Only Tom and a few others knew the truth of what lay within. He turned and went inside, closing the door behind him. The warm lights welcomed him home, illuminating the space he had created, a space that, like himself, had discovered its true nature beneath the surface. Tom smiled, thinking of all the people who had laughed. When he received the old cabin, their laughter had faded to amazement when they stepped inside, but even then, they had only seen part of the truth. The cabin's real gift wasn't its hidden luxury or clever design. It was the permission to look deeper, to value substance over appearance, and to build a life that didn't need to impress anyone else to be perfectly, completely right.